Let's get to it. CBC News is reporting Canada will continue humanitarian aid to Palestinians while preventing the aid from being diverted to Hamas, says International Development Minister Ahmed Hassan in his office. Michael says, fact check, the aid will be delivered to Hamas. Yeah, that's my concern also. How can we, Canada, not or ensure that this aid's not going to be given to terrorists fighting against other people who don't deserve to be terrorized, right? Tracy says, you guys couldn't prevent your own civil servants, prisoners, and bored teens in basements from collecting and abusing curb, but you expect the world to believe you can get aid in without Hamas diverting it? These people think we're stupid. So yep, that's my knee-jerk reaction too. Holy cow, we're just going to keep funding this? Wild, right? Here's Bala, and he's pointing this out. This is a person who was taken hostage by some terrorists and brought back to the Gaza Strip. And you can see on the grain, look at the bag of grain or wheat or whatever it is, flour maybe. It says for free distribution, Palestinian refugees. Okay, you see that from the people of Japan. You see it? The Japanese flag there says from the people of Japan. Rock is covering that part, but you can see people. So you can see from, and then people's kind of covered, but you can see the LE of Japan there, right? And then you can see of the people in the other one, in the further back one, of the people of Japan. Okay, or from the people of Japan. So how does Canada, I would love a plan. I would love somebody to push these people to ask them specifically, could you tell us what Canada's plan is to send money? Are you sending it in a pallet? Are you sending it with a messenger? Are you sending it electronically? What are they going to do with the money when they get the money? Or is somebody on their behalf going to buy goods and then bring those goods in? How are you preventing that person from getting waylaid or having the things hijacked by, I don't know, Hamas, just off the top of my head, whatever, or anybody else who might look at that stuff and think to themselves, that looks good for me, right? What's the plan here? How are we going to prevent that? Because they say that they're going to continue humanitarian aid while preventing that aid from being diverted to Hamas. So how? What's the plan? What's the you're going to make that transparent? You're going to release that to the public, right? I don't believe that there is a plan. They just want the public to believe there's a plan. But I'd like to see the plan. Thanks very much. What's the plan for this? Diplomatic Bites says countries within the EU, the European Union, have questioned the legal basis for suspending funding to Palestine, deeply embarrassing the EU Commission officials who came out today to signal an end to funding in Palestine. So I wanted to show you that Canada is ignoring the rest of the world, the EU and other places. I don't know if the US has confirmed that they're not going to send any money to fund Palestine, but fundamentally, a lot of people have said, we're going to stop funding both sides of this. And Canada says, nope, we know how to do this, says Justin Trudeau, which he said that before. And well, look around. He's been lying, right? He's not telling us the truth. Michael Tomlinson is pointing this out. This is an MPP from Ontario, and Sarah Jama says, I'm reflecting on my role as a politician who is participating in this settler colonial system, and I ask that all politicians do the same. I'm not subscribed to the free a lot of people, I had somebody block me today because the Ecuador, the guy who lives in Ecuador, blocked me today, and I think because he misunderstood what I'm talking about. But fundamentally, after being lied to about COVID, being lied to literally about everything, I think we've been lied to about quite a lot of things, what our taxpayer dollars go for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly after COVID, after having these people stand up and say safe and effective, after lying about Trump, unless you knew different, they told you Trump was a terrible person. And unless you agreed with them, you were a pariah. You were a monster. They would absolutely just go after you until you agreed that, yeah, I guess Trump's a terrible guy too. But if you knew that he wasn't, they couldn't lie to you about him. And I think that there is a situation. So I read, and I read a lot. I like to read. I think that it's interesting. I think humans have written down quite a lot of valuable information into books, and reading those books expands my mind. So I like to read. And I read Patton's memoirs of the Second World War, and I read Churchill's memoirs of the Second World War, and there was a Holocaust scholar on Twitter talking about Israel and what's happened with Palestine and the whole deal. And I said, hey, I've read Churchill's memoirs and I've read Patton's memoirs, and neither one has said a damn word about the Holocaust, period. Why do you think that is, right? And I'm also reading Mein Kampf, and apparently that's a bad thing. You're not allowed to read people who we don't like, right? You're not allowed to read Art of the Deal either. Anyway, I'm reading Mein Kampf. What Mein Kampf says in the first third so far, there's 2 parts of the book, I guess. I'm reading audiobook. But what Mein Kampf says is Marxism was the structure for the economic downfall of Germany. That's basically what he said. And fundamentally, the description of Germany in Mein Kampf by Hitler, I understand he's a bad guy, right? There's the Trump trap, right? I understand Trump's terrible, but I understand that, historically, Hitler's a bad guy. But in his book, he lays out that the economic downfall of Germany was engineered by people who were purposely allowing bad things to happen while simultaneously holding down people trying to fix the problems. And he blames Marxism. He blames, there's a whole lot of language that is antiquated, bourgeoisie, all sorts of stuff to that effect, that's kind of fallen out of regular usage now. But the argument he makes at the beginning of that book is that, the circumstances for him to take control of the government and do what he did. Again, and maybe he's reimagining, maybe he's lying, who knows? But we're very similar to the circumstances surrounding our own country now. I was trying to ask questions about that, because if you're a scholar, how do you reconcile those things? How do you talk about those things? Because those things deserve to be talked about. And I got blocked as a Holocaust denier. So it is what it is. I am going to ask questions, whether or not people block me or whether or not people like what I read or don't like what I read. I don't really particularly care. But it's interesting to me that instead of engaging in a conversation with me about it and asking about, like, why are you skeptical? Why are you saying these awful things about those people who did awful things? Or why are you saying these things about people who supposedly did awful things? Well, because, more information has come to light. I've expanded my mind, and in that expansion, I have questions, and I think the questions are okay. I think the questioning is okay, but I don't subscribe, back to what I was talking about, I don't subscribe to this free Palestine, they're being persecuted by the Jews because the Jews are settlers, and the settler colonist, the Jews are the colonialists, and so on and so forth, whatever it is. I don't subscribe to that paradigm. I don't subscribe to that at all. And I think that at a certain point, you have to deal with the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is you're not going to get rid of Israel. You're not just going to say, well, Israel doesn't exist. Don't you know that the Arabs own this land? And you can't get rid of the West Bank and Gaza Strip and all the rest of it and say, well, don't you know the Jews own this land? That's not, neither one of those things is going to work. That's not realistic, which is why I think that using the terrorist attack as an excuse to smash the Gaza Strip is quite convenient, right? Because it wasn't a military action. These people are not in a position to wage war. They're in a position to wage, guerrilla war, I guess. But the circumstances on the ground there are not great. Those people can't live in a way that is free, that would allow them to raise their families. Now they're waging war. They're saying that we have to get rid of these people, but there has to be a way to do this differently than we have been doing it. And I'm not claiming to know the right answer, but I am not saying that either of these people has a right to depose the other. And I'm not saying that either of these people are fully innocent, despite both claiming victimhood and both being aggressive and violent, right? Like, man, we have to deal with the reality of the situation. We are where we are. We can't be somewhere else. We have to deal with this. It's so frustrating. Anyway, a lot of people don't like that I am not on the side blindly of funding Israel to smash Palestine because this terrorist attack was atrocious. I just don't subscribe to that, and I won't subscribe to that. Not for any reason. I don't think that that's right. I think that you go in and you find the people who did this horrific attack and you hold them accountable. And if you want to do it in Israel, great, fine. Do it in Israel. Do it to their court standard, whatever you want to do it. But then you have to start looking at why did this happen? And why this happened is a whole bunch of terrible things, circumstances that have been funded by the West for a long time. Can we solve this problem? Sure we can, but there's no will to solve this problem because it's conveniently political to trot this crap out, to confuse us, to distract us, to make us thirst to fund another war because we were sick and tired of funding the Ukrainian war. So maybe this one will be palatable enough to package up all that money and that equipment and send it over there. Right? No, I'm not subscribed to any of this. This is not how a civilized society solves its problems. It should be self-aware enough to say, did we have a role in this? Is there something that we did that maybe led to this situation? Possibly, right? Could we solve that thing that we did? Could we not do that again? Could we set circumstances in a different way that sets us on a different track so this doesn't happen again? But that doesn't happen. Okay, back to what the MPP said. Sarah Jama says, I'm reflecting on my role as a politician who's participating in the settler colonial system, and I ask that all politicians do the same. And Michael says, this very serious politician spelled border and Palestine wrong in her very serious message. Now, I'm a terrible speller, so I'm not trying to shame her for spelling. But like you'd think you'd put that through a spell check if you were going to be an elected official, and she is an elected official, and put it out as an official statement. You think you'd spell check that kind of stuff. But anyway, I really disagree with one group of people saying this attack, people deserved it, or the Israelis deserved it. I disagree. I don't think so. But because nobody deserves to be attacked like that. Nobody deserves to have terror inflicted on them, period. I don't think so. If there's a war on, there's different rules of engagement. And if you're in a war zone, then again, different rules of engagement. But if you're living in what you think is a peaceful area in a suburb, and then a band of roving terrorists show up and start attacking and killing people, that's bad. That's bad. Period. That's bad. That's bad. But it didn't happen in a vacuum. And we should acknowledge that. And we should try and fix it. Fix it so that it doesn't happen again. Not fix the historical atrocities that have been waged for thousands of years. Because I don't think that's possible. But we could stop doing it. We could stop propagating it. We could stop effing well funding it. We could stop listening to idiots like this who are trying to bandwagon jump on one side or another. In Canada, a whole bunch of Palestinian rallies that were celebrating the terrorist attacks were allowed to continue. In France, there's police. This is kind of loud, but the police just run into the... I'll play it, I guess. But the police run into the rally that's celebrating the terrorist attacks and break it up because you're not allowed to do that in France. Again, do you agree that they can break this stuff up? Free speech is free speech, but holding up violence as something to propagate, that's totally different, right? And saying that, yes, we should hurt these people celebrating a terrorist attack, that's totally different. I think that it's probably just fine to break up people who are celebrating the death of other people at the hands of terrorists. I think that that's perfectly fine. But what do you think? Here's just a little bit of it. So they break up the rally and so on and so forth. It's a little chaotic there, but that's kind of to be expected. Here's Clandestine. He says, those pesky conservatives are not buying our Ukraine war propaganda anymore. They removed the speaker to halt funding for the war machine. We must convince them to support war and support it now. Bring out the Islamic terrorists again. And you've got Frau saying, bring out the Islamic terrorists. And I think that, again, the timing of all this is quite interesting. Listen to Matt Gaetz. This guy is America First, MAGA Republican, crusading to save America and get Trump back in. He wants Trump back in and stop funding all these foreign wars, et cetera, et cetera. Listen to what he has to say about Israel. Here we go.
A real deep vertical cuts based on the harm they've done to our fellow Americans.
Very quick. You can't get Israel aid until you get a speaker. Is that right? Accurate?
No, that's not true. So we have Israel essentially on a $3.8 billion auto pay. Marco Rubio, the former chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, put out a statement that the Biden administration is fully authorized to grant any request that we could even conceive Israel having at this stage of the game. There's a reason we've put decades into a qualitative military edge for Israel. They've got the capability to wipe out Hamas, and that appears to be precisely what they're doing.
Very good.
So, right? They've set the stage so that they've got their bad guy. The bad guys are terrorists. The whole world is on board. Destroy the terrorists. Let's get rid of those terrorists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is reimagining everything that happened. And I'm not saying, again, that terrorism is good. It's not. But we are being manipulated to support another war, funding another war, et cetera, et cetera. Sovereign Bra, this is the Israel section, says, okay, I've kept an eye on this Israel situation for the past few days. So we've got an expert here. Really. Here's what I've learned, and here are my blunt and honest thoughts. 1, Israel chose to ignore intelligence from Egyptian officials about a major attack coming from Hamas. 2, multiple former IDF soldiers and Israeli intelligence personnel have come forward online and said there's 0% chance that Israel was unaware of this attack beforehand or couldn't have prevented it. 3, we just watched unsophisticated terrorists on hand gliders soar into one of the most heavily defended and surveilled countries on the planet. 4, within 48 hours of the attack, we're now suddenly seeing enormous support for an American war with Iran and the genocide of the Palestinian people. I'm witnessing American pastors and formerly level-headed influencers in our world completely lose their minds and call for genocide. It's unsurprising but insane to watch. If the events of the past 3 years have taught me anything, it's that when people get whipped into an emotional frenzy, critical thinking completely goes out the window. People become highly susceptible and will rush to extremely dangerous conclusions without thinking about the consequences. I think this is what we're witnessing with this situation in Israel. I'm reminded of Pearl Harbor and 9/11. In both scenarios, the American government received intelligence in advance of the attacks, but chose not to prevent the attacks. Why? The American government was willing to sacrifice the lives of American citizens in order to advance its geopolitical goals. Pearl Harbor gave the justification to enter World War II. 9/11 gave the justification to invade the Middle East and drastically expand the American military-industrial complex and our surveillance apparatus. And what did we get after 9/11 and doing all of that? We got a lot less freedom and a lot more security and military-industrial complex for years and years and years. Back to this. They were brutal and extremely traumatic events for the American public to witness. The emotional trauma caused people to get whipped into an emotional frenzy. America wanted one thing in response to these attacks: the blood of our enemies. I see the same psyop playing out now. 100%. People are whipped into a frenzied bloodlust. In their frenzied bloodlust, people are overlooking some seriously important facts here. Notably, 1, the fact that none of this adds up. Yep. 2, innocent civilians are being threatened with genocide. I think that there is elements of that. I think that, and I'll show you in just a minute what they're talking about of crushing the Gaza Strip and the rhetoric used by Netanyahu and his generals. How many people of the people in the Gaza Strip are guilty? How can we be sure? Are we okay with some guilty or some innocent people dying to have vengeance? Are we okay with that? Because I don't know. I don't think so. 3, back to this. Escalated violence in the Middle East and a war with Iran both risk the rest of the planet getting dragged into World War III. They want a World War III. It won't be nuclear because it won't be nuclear in the sense of like Terminator nuclear. They might tell us it's nuclear. There might be all sorts of different propaganda things. But I think that nuclear, if we had nuclear bombs the way that Terminator 2, they're depicted in that, or they're sold to us, talked about, etc. This world-ending thing. Somebody would have used one by now. Somebody somewhere would have used. How many nuclear bombs were blown up after the Second World War, sinking ships to test them off of 3 Mile Island and so on and so forth, right? Like, I've got questions, not just about the history we've learned either. Anyway, back to this. It won't be nuclear. It'll be economic, right? Do you know after the Second World War, it took 10 years for the meat rations in the UK to ease? 10 years. 10 years. That's a decade. It wasn't until the mid 1950s, maybe 51, 52, 53, that things started getting back to normal. And the full meat ration, I think, was fully repealed in 55, although people were getting enough meat prior to. Anyway, back to this. What happened in Israel this weekend was obviously gut-wrenching and awful to witness. I do not trust Israel's so-called intelligence failure, nor do I trust the snakes in Washington calling for war with Iran, and I sure as hell don't trust any of the emotionally frenzied influencers calling for explicit genocide of innocent civilians. And I don't trust people who block me because they don't want to engage in conversation about maybe we shouldn't rush to judgment on this one. Back to this. This was a defining moment in history, similar to Pearl Harbor, 9/11, COVID, the beginning of the Ukraine war, etc. And a lot of people just got played. Yeah, hard. People responded by going full mask off, exposing themselves as reckless and incapable of exercising sound judgment in moments of chaos and heightened emotion. And we're now at the brink of World War III because of it. I don't know about that. It seems to be cool enough. Fingers crossed. This is all worth nothing. This is all worth noting, There's a high likelihood there will be more chaos throughout the rest of this decade. There will be more psychological operations. There will be more moments in time in which cooler heads ought to prevail, but people will get whipped into an emotional frenzy instead. Keep your wits about you and be cautious in whom you allow yourself to be influenced by. Recognize the government and intelligence agencies spend enormous resources waging psychological operations on social media nonstop when stuff like this goes down. Remember that when chaos is at its peak, history shows there's almost always a hidden agenda being played out, and that hidden agenda is always designed to prey on your base emotions to facilitate the desired end result. Pray for world peace tonight. And so I often say, well, I've been saying for the last couple of days, it feels like we're a starved rat and running to the cheese in the center, and it's predictable that we will go there, as predictable as the rat going to the cheese. We will go for bloodlust. We want the blood of our enemies. We want this. We want that. We don't want to find that person who shook the jar, right? We're the two ants. We're the red ants and the black ants fighting in the jar. But our enemy is not the black ant or the red ant or whatever it is. It's the person who shook the jar, right? That's the enemy. And the person who's shaking the jar right now it's monetary. It's fiscal shaking. Mel Jolie says Canada will airlift citizens out of Israel in the coming days. This is last night at 6:55 p.m. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Jolie confirmed Tuesday that Ottawa is planning to airlift Canadians out of Tel Aviv in the coming days. Oh, phew. I mean, yeah, an emergency, we're right there. No problems. Canada, an emergency, we'll get there in, 36 hours? 72 hours? How many hours is it? The emergencies happened. It's come and gone. Things seem to be calming down in Tel Aviv, but similar to getting our prime minister on a plane to replace the plane that had issues that definitely were not drugs related in India. This situation, urgent. We'll get there soon. A few days, whatever, couple days. We're updating you that there will be an update tomorrow, and the update will be more fulsome than this. Anyway, back to this. Jolie said government aims to conduct the evacuation using aircraft from the Canadian Armed Forces and is working on additional options for people who are unable to reach the airport in Tel Aviv. She said in a statement posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, that the flights will be available to Canadian citizens and permanent residents along with their spouses and their children. I know this situation has been difficult for many of you, and many of you want to return home to your families and have no way to do so safely, Jolie said. We will help you. More details will be available on Wednesday, she promised. So we'll help you. Stay tuned. I'll let you know what the help looks like. Also, why isn't this done on Saturday? Why wasn't that done on Sunday? Why wasn't it done on Monday? Wednesday. Yesterday is when it happened. But seriously, it's a long, long time. Lori Goldstein says this person, Tal Schneider, is being quoted here. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces. His policy of treating the terror group as a partner at the expense of Abbas and Palestinian statehood resulted in wounds that will take Israel years to heal from. So that's not great. Not great at all, because these political games we play, Hamas was created by Israel. Hamas and Israel are both funded by the United States. I mean, conflict of interest doesn't begin to describe what's going on, right? The whole thing's a powder keg, and the U.S. is paying for the powder, and we're paying for the keg. This thread says the Israeli army says it does not have confirmation about allegations that Hamas beheaded babies. So one of the things that I noticed was that we are being manipulated. Here's a guy talking about that we don't have any confirmation that this baby story is real. Here we go.
We're still trying to get clarity on so many different things. The number of civilians, the number of people missing, particularly from America, there are questions being asked of this president. How many are still being held hostage? I have to say that in an interview earlier on today, a reference was made by a Bloomberg anchor to the alleged mutilation of babies, which is an absolutely shocking story. We should make it clear that these are unsubstantiated reports, and we apologise for that error, but seeking clarity on some of these reports is a big, big deal for us over the next few days.
Yeah, we're going to have to corroborate that baby story. Yikes. And so I noticed this, and I noticed that that's a really, really big trigger for people, right? They hear those monsters are beheading innocent babies, right? The rhetoric surrounding that, just the image that conjures in your mind is powerful. And somebody could, I don't know, exploit that, use the emotion created in you that image evokes to convince you to send money against those evil monsters who would perpetrate that awful thing on a child, right? It's a really powerful thing. Who would use that? Well, this guy says now they're really bringing out the high-level MK Ultra PSYOP tactics with the murder of babies in the Israel and Gaza conflict to really get people behind the war machine. Where have we seen this before? Oh, right. Naria. She was a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl who testified to Congress that she had witnessed the murder of infant children by Iraqi soldiers by pulling them from incubators to die. Her testimony was instantly believed at the time and widely used by the media to bang the drums of war and get us involved in the conflict in the Persian Gulf. Years later, it was discovered her testimony was a complete fabrication. She was an actor. The public relations firm Hill and Knowlton, which was employed by the Citizens for Free Kuwait, arranged the testimony, helped her with the speech, and coached her on the delivery. The CIA is who requested that she take acting lessons in the first place. She was also the niece of a major politician in Kuwait and later disclosed to be Naira al-Sabah, daughter of Saudi bin Nestor al-Sabah, Kuwaiti ambassador to the US. You have to question everything, every single narrative, every story, every picture, every video, all of it. Watch this. This is a heart-wrenching story of a volunteer nurse at the Al Din Hospital. I think it's Al Din Hospital. And she watched these evil monsters come in and desecrate babies. It's all fake. Here we go. Fake, 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 fake.
I volunteered at the Al Din Hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying. I could not help but think of my nephew, who, if born premature, might have died that day as well.
The story begins with her and her sister and her nephew. Her nephew was 5 days old, and they were at the hospital, and the woman gave birth, and then her sister and her nephew left, and she stayed to volunteer, and then she saw this horror, right? Right, but it's fake. It's false. Now, here's the Wikipedia article on this. The Naira testimony was false testimony given before the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus on October 10, 1990 by a 15-year-old girl who was publicly identified at the time by her first name, Naira. The testimony was widely publicized and was cited numerous times by U.S. senators and President Bush in their rationale to support Kuwait in the Gulf War. And here is the great lie of the first Gulf War, right? This article doesn't exist anymore if you go to the original URL, but it exists on the archives, so that's interesting, right? 2 months after the Iraqi troops marched into Kuwait on August 2nd, 1990, a 15-year-old girl appeared before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus on Capitol Hill, a body established by Representatives Tom Lantos and John Porter in 1983 to raise awareness of human rights abuses worldwide. The caucus, which wasn't an official congressional committee despite its name, introduced the girl as 15-year-old Naira, her last name withheld to protect her family in Kuwait. Naira recalled the trauma of watching Iraqi troops storm into Al Din Hospital in Kuwait, where she volunteered as a nurse. Live on the air, she said the Iraqis had removed 312 babies from incubators and left them to die on the floor. And her testimony struck deep, blah, blah, blah. So you can read more about that. The link's in the description if you're interested. But it's a lie. It's a falsehood. They are doing this to manipulate you into supporting their horrific war. And if the babies didn't actually die, if the vile dogs didn't actually behead any babies or anything like that, well, that's just a minor footnote in this grand, discussion narrative of war, right? Sometimes people get things wrong. It wasn't our fault. We were told that the babies were beheaded. We just didn't check whether it was true or not. And then we told you that it was true. So it's very interesting. And so I'm skeptical. After COVID, I was skeptical. I was skeptical of some of the health things that we've been told. And the more I read, the more I learn, the more I'm shocked at big pharma. But we incentivize that. We incentivize it with money. We think that if we give money to big pharma, they'll come up with magic pills or magic something or others that fix us. And we have examples where that's been true. But I think we're being manipulated there too, right? And I have questions when I hear about all of the crazy things that we've been lied to and bold-faced lied to, like politicians who should know better, get on their social media, write articles. Mr. Poilievre's wife's writing articles. Cam Guthrie is saying these things are safe and effective. They get it out there and they say things that are not true based on lies told to them by advisors or whoever else. And that solidifies it as truth. And if you go around, so if you went around talking about this girl in the 90s saying, I don't think that that's true, people would have lost their mind on you. How dare you support the Iraqi monsters, those dogs, right? They killed babies. They threw them on the cold floor, right? You support Hamas, you terrorist supporting Nazi. I've had multiple conversations this morning with people. They're very upset that I'm not on board with what they want to see happen to these Hamas people. And I'm saying, I'm not sure that any of these people who live in the region are actually responsible for this. If I was Netanyahu and I wanted to get rid of these people, I might hire some mercenaries to, commit some terror and atrocities and then pin it on these guys, right? And bingo, bingo, bongo, no more problem, right? And I showed you the footage of Netanyahu talking about a similar strategy anyway. So it's not even like it's my idea and I'm projecting it onto him. It's his idea. He talked about it on video. Jeepers creepers. Benjamin Netanyahu. Here we go. He says Israel is at war. This is sent yesterday at 3:36 p.m. This is October 9th. Sorry, 2 days ago. He says Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way, but though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless, once the Jewish people were defenseless, no longer, Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling, slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. Have we verified that, Bibi? They're savages. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is ISIS. I've got tabs that have talked about that too. Anyway, back to this. And just as the forces of civilization united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people in Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it's fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Israel will win this war, and when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins. That speech has a very different timbre. There's a whole lot of... Have you seen Europa? There's a whole lot of very interesting things about that I can't get into right now because it's a little outside the podcast scope. Anyway, carrying on. Here is Jack Straw, and he says, total war, Gaza tonight. Israeli Defense Minister Gallant says abolition of all rules of war. And it's a very violent scene. I don't know how loud it is. Hold on. Let's see here. I'll turn it down and then we'll play it. Here we go. Apparently this is from Gaza, but again, be discerning. Who knows? Have you seen Wag the Dog? In Wag the Dog, they put together video clips that are supposed to be from the war, but Kirsten Dunst, who's in an uncredited cameo, is carrying a chip bag in the recorded scene, but then during post-production they changed that into a baby. That's right. So here is, take it all with a grain of salt. Are we being Wag the Dog? Didn't Hillary Clinton just say Wag the Dog? right? Is this whole thing a pageant? We just need a pageant. We need a leader, a hero, right? A bad guy and a song. So watch Wag the Dog if you haven't. I know I've talked about this. It was probably 2 years ago now that I talked a lot about Wag the Dog, but this seems like another one of those situations. And Hillary Clinton was talking about it the other day. Here we go.
يا الله دمار 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 دمر الدنيا دمار.
So it's a burned out, bombed out building, and they're, I guess, trying to get into it to see what they can save. I'm not sure. Here is, this is a meme, and it's Gaza versus Israel. And on the left is the Iron Dome rockets that are anti-aircraft, anti-incoming rockets and all of that. And it says U.S. taxpayer dollars. And on the right are the rockets presumably coming in from the Gaza Strip or from Palestine or wherever it is. And those are also paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars, which is the point of my whole thing, right? We're paying for all of this, and it's ridiculous. We're shaking up the jar with our money, right? Here's some money, black ants. Here's some money, red ants. We'll shake up the jar, and then you guys nuke each other in there, right? Or you firebomb each other, whatever you're going to do, whatever your ants do that in there. We're going to watch you, and then we'll make money off of it because we're going to sell tickets. And that's that. That's what's going on right now. We're wagging the dog right now, or we're being wagged. The tail is wagging us right now. Here's Toronto Sun, and Brian Lilly's reporting Canada is excluded from quaint statement on Israel for a reason. And the short version of this is, he says, I've discussed this with people who work at the highest levels of the Canadian government, Harper, Chrétien, Mulroney governments. None of them see Canada being excluded as anything but an insult. They don't buy the quaint line that the Liberals are selling because it's false. So this is the Canada was excluded, right, from the statement on Israel. And I showed you yesterday the White House's press release talking about how the United Kingdom, United States, Germany, Italy, and what was the other one? United States, G5. Italy was the one I thought I was going to forget. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The G5, Germany. Did I say Germany? Fudge. Anyway, they put out a statement about Israel. Canada wasn't invited. Japan wasn't invited. And so, yeah, yikes, right? Like, that doesn't look great. And it is absolutely an insult. It is absolutely meant to, I don't know, spur Canada or Canadians to action, make sure that we understand that we're being excluded from the G7. So it was the G8, and then they kicked Russia out. And now, by gross domestic product, we're actually at 10th, I think now. Italy is bigger than us. There's a couple other places that are bigger than us that are not in the G7. I think Italy was like 9. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And so is Canada getting replaced, right? Holy smoke. In the G7, we're not big enough. Sorry, Canada. Just shut up and go sit over there and think about your gender. Here is a meme I liked, and I thought it was pretty funny. It's a guy with a top hat, and he's a big guy, and he's standing right on the border of presumably Israel and Palestine, because on one side there's the Palestinian flag, and on the other side there's the Israeli flag, and the big guy standing over the flags here is feeding them both money. So this is a meme describing my ant jar description, right? And I think it's accurate. I think that the name on the hat says New World Order. But I've said before that I think that our governments are at a point where they're taken over and they're trying to normalize the new expectations. Like, don't expect to buy a house. Don't expect to be able to afford to buy a car. Food's a little dicey, but if you're good, we'll give you crickets. You know what I mean? They're trying to bring this in. Get that mask on your face. I don't want to see your face because you're quite bothersome. No, you can't have an identity. No, you can't have a nationality. No, you can't run away from these rules. That's what they're trying to do, and it's the New World Order. And they're already there. They're just trying to implement it while we sit here and say, no, we don't live in that country. We do, and they're trying to make us realize it, I guess, make us wake up to that fact and accept it. And I'm not there. I'm not there. Pierre Poilievre, listen to this language. Listen to the language about the bad guys from the leader of the opposition. This is meant to influence you. This is meant to make you think that sending money to a war is going to fix this problem. I disagree. Here's Pierre Poilievre. He says, heartbroken to learn of another young Canadian among the innocent victims of the terrorist death cult, Hamas. I send my deepest condolences to his family. May his memory be a blessing. The terrorist death cult, Hamas. Okay. All right. The terrorist death cult, they're the bad guys. Cast as the bad guys. If you question, are they the bad guys? You will be told they're a terrorist death cult, you idiot, Mark. Blocked. Right? So you're not allowed to question this. This is both to spur you on and to get you in line, right? Spur you on to say, yeah, we better fund this war. We'll get those monsters, that death cult. I don't want a death cult here. But also, if you say, hold on a second, a death cult, are you sure? Because, there's a little history here. How dare you deny that they're a death cult, right? It's very interesting to me. Mercedes Stevenson says, I asked the Canadian Armed Forces and MDNO if Canada had been asked for any military support by Israel or would be offering any as the Americans have. We have considerably less to offer. The CAF says that we also currently do not anticipate a requirement for Canadian military assistance from Israel. So they haven't asked and we're not offering. But here is, yesterday I've been talking about how all of these attacks and the things that are going on could be leading to a situation where the people who have been let in through open borders. Trump talks about the southern border, which we're going to talk about now. But I've talked about how our immigration has been opened wide and people are coming in through illegal means. People are overstaying visas. There's all sorts of different things. A different method to get the same result, a whole bunch of people in the country who are maybe not aligned with your country. There's been speculation over this. This is maybe UN troops. More speculation as well. Maybe this is a military force of Muslim people, speculated in the UK. I've heard people speculating about Chinese infiltration of military men in schools and universities. All, I think, have a good argument could be made for all of them. But it's very difficult to see. And if you try and make that argument, people get upset. So it's interesting. Very interesting. Eddie says, once Western nations commit weapons and military aid to Israel, the millions of staged Muslims in those countries will be activated for chaos. Remember, they let them in our country in violation of federal laws and oaths of office. While we were distracted, they will enact the Great Reset. Yeah, maybe. Here's Romaine, RN, and she's sharing a truth post from Donald Trump. And Trump says, the same people that raided Israel are pouring into the once beautiful USA through our totally open southern border at record numbers. Are they planning an attack within our country? Crooked Joe Biden and his boss, Barack Hussein Obama, did this to us. So there's interesting things being said with regards to how vulnerable America feels, how vulnerable how vulnerable these policies make the United States. Is this a plausible thing? Could this be actioned? Certainly. Absolutely, I think. 100%. So these policies matter. And it's very interesting that these leaders are not interested in anything but funding a forward war. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful